The US government publicly stated that they are considering taking equity stakes in US energy companies. And if this is true, this could be a saving grace for many oil stocks and could ultimately mean that this is a bailout from bankruptcy for many of these companies. Now, we all know that oil has been making the news a lot, with ETFs like USO making headlines, to the OPEC Plus issues recently, and just the overall lack of demand for this commodity. Demand for oil on a global scale has pretty much plummeted, which has put many companies, including American companies, on the brink of extinction. Low oil prices means that it essentially costs these companies more money to drill out oil and sell it than it does to just sit there and do nothing. But of course, if they sit there and do nothing, that's another problem altogether, because these companies still have debts that they owe, expenses that they have to pay. So that's not really a solution either, which puts them in a very tough financial position. And as a result, because of this, a lot of oil companies, even the giants, are forced to do things like cut their dividends or cut their spending. ExxonMobil, for example, here stated that they'll be cutting back on their spending by a whopping $10 billion as oil prices continue to collapse. These companies are essentially forced to go into survival mode here, which puts a strain on their operations and profits as well. And ExxonMobil isn't the only giant struggling here, guys. Shell, another massive company in the oil space, has come out and said that they're looking at a $800 million write-down for Q1 as issues with oil globally continue to rage on. So the longer the demand for oil globally continues to decline, the more money these companies will continue losing, putting them in a very awkward financial position. So that's why the latest news here around the US government possibly helping out these companies by either buying stakes in them or bailing them out is very big and very important. So we need to spend some time today to discuss this and figure out how this could affect some oil investments. I know a lot of you guys have recently bought into some oil tanker stocks, and I will be discussing that as well. So make sure to stay tuned for this video. And as always, if you like this kind of content, drop a like down below, because it shows me that you want to see more content like this, and I'll create more content like this for you guys if that's the case. So at a recent press conference at the White House, President Trump said he wants to help the oil industry. He suggested that the federal government could buy fuel for the country in advance, as well as purchase airline tickets in advance. This move, of course, would create some demand for oil and also at the same time help prices to somewhat stabilize. Now, this will also result in helping the airline companies, which are also going through a rough patch right now. Those companies are also seeking bailout money from the government, and they're also in a position where they really need the government's help here. Now, when asked the question directly about whether the government would actually purchase equity stakes in these companies, the secretary said that it was definitely a possibility that they're looking into, and this essentially tells us that nothing is really off the table here when it comes to helping out these companies. And Trump is also very determined here to do whatever it takes, stating that the energy business is very important to him, and they're going to build it up once again. He then goes on to say that the global issue really hurt these energy businesses as much as any other business because of the collapsing demand in oil while supply kept coming in. And guys, what happens when you have oversupply but no demand? That's right, prices fall like we've seen recently in oil futures. Now, a lot of these issues really were sparked a few weeks ago when Russia and Saudi Arabia essentially got into a bit of a conflict here with oil, where there was a disagreement and Saudi Arabia pretty much said, you know what, we're going to ramp up our production here to the point where there's so much oversupply that it would hurt everyone, including them, but they're in the best position to get through this over the long term. This was kind of like the final domino to fall, as demand had already collapsed globally because of the global issue, which in itself led to lower oil prices already by this point. Now, Trump, however, did step in recent weeks and helped to negotiate a reduction in output from OPEC and other countries, including Russia. But so far, this hasn't helped with oil prices yet, as things are still down, things are still weak, and supply is still too much for the demand. And while Russia and Saudi Arabia could make further production cuts here, Texas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota are also going to be making production cuts, as well as Canada. And guys, Canada, if you didn't already know, is one of the largest producers of oil in the world, and this whole impact of oil is really having a huge effect on Canada's economy as well. Now, alternatively from buying direct equity stakes in US oil companies, like I said, the government could also just purchase oil for future use. The US is the largest consumer of oil, and what Trump suggests they do is just buy oil at a great price into the future, and this would give these businesses the infusion that they needed, and the US government would have a ton of oil for future use at cheap prices. And so this would result in a win-win situation theoretically. And I think that we actually may see this possibility, this scenario play out, where the government not only comes in and buys oil from these companies, but they also essentially bail them out. And this bailout could look like many different things, but what they could end up doing, which is similar to what they're doing with the airline industry, is that they go and they purchase maybe an equity stake, or they go and they give them a huge chunk of money and they say a certain portion of it is for a grant, a certain portion of it is a loan that they have to pay off, and they're off to the races and they should be able to survive through this crisis. Oil is extremely important to not only the US economy but also the global economy, and companies like ExxonMobil and Chevron, which are US companies, need to be able to survive through this in order for the economy to stabilize here, because these are massive companies that employ tons of people, and a fail in one of those companies could result in some major implications in the US economy. Now, the one issue that I see is whether the US government buys this oil or not. Storing all of this oil recently has become a major challenge. We recently saw oil futures pretty much tank because a lot of these oil tankers are pretty much close to, if not already at, full capacity. And there was really nowhere to store this oil, so no one really wanted to purchase or hold on to those contracts. Now, a company that recently gained a lot of attention from this is Nordic American Tankers, ticker symbol NAT, and they're essentially an oil tanker company designed to store oil. Now, as this demand for storage has kept rising over the last few weeks, their profits have also kept rising, most likely, so they are one of the few companies actually benefiting from the issue right now. However, like I said, storage capacity is a very real concern, and even companies like NAT have a defined amount of space that they can store oil in. So yes, while this may be a good short-term play here buying into the stock, over the long term, if you expect oil demand to pick back up, NAT will once again most likely be a company that gradually loses its moat, if you will, and revenues and profits will start to decline again as well. Now, I'm not saying this company can't be a good short-term play here, but personally I stay away from short-term moves and short-term investing because I see that as speculation and essentially gambling here, so this isn't a stock that I'm going to be personally touching here. However, if you do want to hold NAT, I would go to their website, read up a bit about this company, find out how they make money and how the business actually works. Then, if you're happy and satisfied with what you see, make a decision on if it's worth an investment at that point. I really do hope that some of you who blindly bought into NAT in the last week take the time to really understand this business. Because the way I see it from my research, when things do go back to normal and oil stabilizes once again, which I believe will be soon enough, you could see some big losses again in this company. And this is because in stable economic times, this company isn't that strong financially. Their cash balance here, as you can see compared to their long-term debt, is quite honestly shocking. And really the best case scenario for them is for this global issue and global oversupply of oil to continue so that they can continue charging more money, make more profits, and ultimately pay down that debt. So even in the best case scenario here, I see that the money that they're going to be earning will be going towards paying down that debt. And while the stock price may rise from all of this, it doesn't mean that this company will be in a financially strong position in the future. Also keep in mind, this is not a US company. They are registered outside of the US. So if that concerns you, or if you're not really comfortable investing in foreign companies, that is also something to consider with your investment thesis. So guys, while the government is stepping in here to help out these oil companies, it could end up being good for those companies, but could end up being very bad for oil tanker companies. Remember, for these oil tanker companies like NAT really to store oil and make a lot of money, they need the supply to be overwhelming and demand to be very low so that they can continue charging very high prices to store that oil. Now, if the US government starts buying oil and other governments around the world also start buying oil, That's going to raise demand significantly. Once airplanes start flying, it's going to raise demand once again significantly. And all of this will result in stocks like NAT getting hurt quite significantly, and it could result in similar numbers that we've seen in previous years with this company, which aren't that great. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, drop a like down below and hit that subscribe button with the bell notification if you're brand new to this channel. But anyways, if you are invested in any of these oil tanker stocks or any oil stocks directly, let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to invest positively, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.